So, we look like we're ready. But this is day one. It's about the work. And I've said that from day one. It'll always be the same message. It's about work. You got to go earn your right every year. It doesn't matter what the players are, the coaches, expectations, where you were, where you're going. We got to work, man.
Wants to throw it to Stewart. He caught it. He stole on first down. Oh, yes. The big man dives down to the 31-yard line. Oh, that is beautiful.
Let me tell you something. I love this team now. I got goosebumps, gentlemen. I love this team.
Fields looking pressured, hit from behind, taken down. Aiden Hutchinson got him.
What do you think about the secondary?
Just look at the name, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You drafted Branch.
It started off with that huge hit on Beasley.
Be calling things out. There's a big hit right away. And boom!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Goff dropped it in the bucket that time.
We're in our window now to win.
Aaron Rodgers exits the NFC North as a loser. What's happening? Rocked on Detroit Lions, off the cuff, episode 29. And yep, you guessed it. It's another solo mission tonight. But we're here. What's happening, everybody? Glad to welcome you all in. Hope you don't mind the background music tonight. Wanted to give it a little something, behind all the air. And, being by myself, I got to have something to listen to. Keep me motivated. Keep me going tonight. Outside of Dan Campbellisms, man. I tell you what, that guy could fire up anything. All right, so here we are. It is Friday, September 1st. We are just a few days away from opening night, Kansas City. And I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about what we have going on with this newly assembled initial 53-man roster. I also wanted to get into a little bit about, some of the pieces of this team on the roster and how they fit and what do we see, kind of our projection throughout the season and how this team is slated to win. And we'll get into it here in just a moment. I also wanted to go through the schedule and kind of give you my official, unofficial, official predictions of wins and losses. I know I've been on record saying that the Lions will win 12 and lose 5. I think I'm going to stick with that, but we'll find out here towards the end of the show. All right. So if you guys are jumping in on the chat, go ahead and say hi. I'll be managing it by myself tonight, so I will get to all of your questions just as soon as I can. Just bear with me. Don't leave if I don't get to your question. I promise I will get to it. But first off tonight, welcome into episode 29, Rock Down Detroit Lions off the cuff. First thing I want to get to here is this roster, this 53-man roster that's got everybody talking. There's been some big changes to what the Detroit Lions have done, in seasons past. And what we're seeing on this roster is totally different to a degree. I mean, players are players, right? So here we go. Offense. First question that came in over the week was, are the Lions missing a big body option in the passing game? And I thought that was a wonderful question. And the reason why is this past spring, I put an article out that talked exactly about this. And the Lions last season were one of the smaller receiving corps in the league. and they had a lot of production. They did very well considering. So I think it's a great question, and here's how I'm going to answer it. Number one, we don't have a Calvin Johnson type size. We don't have that big body. And what do I mean by that? Calvin Johnson was 6'5". I apologize. Calvin Johnson was 6'5", 236 pounds. Alan Lazard was 6'5", 227 pounds. DK Metcalf is 6'4", 235 pounds. Chase Claypool, 6'4", 238 pounds. Mike Evans, 6'5", 225 pounds. I think you know where I'm going here. And there's one other great Lions player, not all those guys obviously ever played for the Lions, but Herman Moore, 6'4", 215. He kind of redefined the wide receiver role, in my opinion, when it came to size. He was one of the bigger wide receivers in the NFL at the time. He wasn't the biggest, but he was one of the biggest. So,
And this is how.
Yeah, we are missing that big body. And we don't have anybody on the team that comes close. The Lions receivers averaged just 6'1.5" in 2023. But it is a marked improvement over last season. Believe it or not, the Lions only averaged 5'10.5" last season. So they've gone up a full 2 inches in height. So I do think it's a definite improvement. Height matters a lot, when you're a receiver, along with speed and your strength and being able to fight off the cornerbacks or the safeties or whoever, is trying to jam you up at the line. So give me just a second here. I want to make sure that this gets out. So what are your big questions for tonight? Let us know in the comments, what would you like us to address when it comes to this Detroit Lions team and the roster and the schedule, or heck, even your own predictions and, how you guys feel like this season is going to go. Give me just 1 second here. All right, enough of that. So one of the biggest gripes that I had last season was that the Lions, were not possessing the height and size needed to compete for, contested balls or to contested catches, last season, or to be a true red zone threat. So they've made a significant change here. Adding height, it should be noted that Khalif Raymond is 5'8". So that really kind of bends that average down, if you will, as the other four starters or the other four initial on the 53 man, they average 6'1 3/4". So, an entire inch and a quarter above the five collectively. So we do have some height. We finally have Antoine Green, I believe, is 6'4". Marvin Jones is, I believe, 6'2". Josh Reynolds, I believe, is 6'2 or 6'3". Khalif Raymond is 5'8". Amon Ra is 6 foot. So we've got some decent height, but the biggest thing is we got ballers. We got guys that love football, and we're going to work cohesively as a unit. So one other notable addition to the wide receiver group, which he's not part of the group, but the Lions added Sam Laporta to the mix at tight end. And the more tape we watch, he is definitely a pass-catching tight end. And he will be utilized as, just a much bigger receiver that can actually run routes and has decent speed, to beat the linebackers early and also give the offensive line an additional blocker on running downs. So when I look at this as a complete unit, my take is pretty simple. The Lions are way underrated in the receiver room. They are led by an absolute madman in Amon Ra. Marvin Jones is the elder statesman in the room with significant ability still and very sticky hands. The guy doesn't fumble, doesn't drop balls. He runs probably some of the cleanest routes that you'll see in the NFL. Khalif Raymond was extended for 2 years for a reason. The Lions just don't hand out contracts for the heck of it. I mean, the guy is a playmaker, and he's exactly what Dan Campbell looks for in somebody that's a little bit undersized that can go out and produce and do everything that's asked of him and more. Khalif he's a fighter, man. The guy is so gritty. I don't know if there's enough grit in Detroit for him because the guy, he just exudes it. What a talent. And that should be said too. Don't let your size exclude you from things that you want to do in life, because clearly at 5'8", not many guys play in the NFL, and hell, even at 5'8", not many guys play in the NBA. You can play baseball for sure. You can play baseball. It's just not the size that's attributed to the NFL, but he did it, and there's a few others that have done it too. So Raymond offers a ton of versatility. He runs some of the cleanest routes too. He gets some of the best separation on, last season. I think he was the best wide receiver on the team as far as separation was concerned. Then there's Josh Reynolds. Him and Goff have, Josh Reynolds and Goff have played together for about 4 seasons now, maybe a little bit more. And then you have Antoine Green, who really showed us his ability early and in the last preseason game to get open and, run great routes and turn on the speed for big playability. Looks like we got one comment in here already. There's Tim. Hey, Tim, man, I appreciate you coming in every show, man. I really do. Says, I can't freaking wait 6 more days. Till the Lions shock the world with a 10-plus point win. First-year season ticket holder. Looks like I started drinking the Kool-Aid at the right time. Hey, I'm drinking Coca-Cola because they are now a sponsor for the Detroit Lions. Not Rocked On Detroit Lions, but for the Detroit Lions. Switched. I quit drinking soda for years, and all of a sudden now I'm drinking it again. I don't know why, but whatever. All right, so there was another question that came in during the week, which was another great question, but I got to take a drink and lubricate this throat here for a second. All right. This is another great question. How will the Lions have success in the passing game without the big bodies that create matchup nightmares that are currently not on this team? So I guess that kind of coincides with the first question. We really don't have the big bodies. I mean, yeah, our tight ends are 6'4", 6'5", and we've got one wide receiver that's 6'4", but we don't have that big body guy. A DK Metcalf, that's a big body. That's somebody that's going to push you around to get what he wants. But anyway, as I said just a moment ago, I think that the team is underrated. And I think the receivers are highly undervalued. I'll tell you right now who I'm picking up, when I do my fantasy leagues. There's going to be a few Lions on there. Hey, Hatter's House, 710, watching from SoCal. Welcome back. Appreciate you. So anyway, when you look at the Lions and what they were able to do last season, Goff was very efficient when targeting the short and intermediate routes. And the offense really controlled the short and intermediate zones. It's kind of like their bread and butter. Ton of success. I mean, there's Myers Farm too. Let me get you up in there, Myers Farm. How do the Lions handle Kelsey? All right, let me get to that one in just a second. Let me get through this question. I'm going to come back to that one. Great question. I don't know if I have the answer. I don't know if anybody has the answer. We might, though. All right, so the Lions, like I was saying, they really controlled the short and intermediate zones, and that's what they utilized as their bread and butter last season. And when you are as dynamic as this offensive style is, and you're able to control, the clock by gaining multiple first downs during a drive, one, you're giving yourself more time. You're taking time away from the other offense. You're giving your defense a rest. You're not a one-hit quit where you've got to get the ball downfield and hurry up and score, or always worried about the big play and having to make the big plays. If you were able to get chunks, and I'm not talking dink and dunk, I'm not talking pure West Coast offense. I'm talking of controlling a zone and really targeting these intermediate routes is what they did. When you look at Goff's passing tree, he is heavy right in the, from the backfield, forward into the flats, the first zone, and the second and the third tier, over to the middle. The left side, not so hot. He definitely doesn't like throwing across his body, which a lot of right-handed quarterbacks don't. Right? Any quarterback really doesn't, right or left-handed, I guess I should say. But the interesting thing is when you're able to get multiple first downs in your drive, you're not bound by being a home run hitter, like I was saying, and you're working up chunk plays to keep the defense guessing, and the offense is moving forward, clip by clip. And when the play action starts to work, when you've developed this short and intermediate control, and the play action begins to work, that's where the big play potential really comes in. And that's when the defense, if they sit down on a route, you got them. And, you play action to Gibbs, he can come right out of the backfield and run a post or whatever he needs to run to get free. And I guarantee you we're going to see some big plays like that this season. But this is also why Jameson Williams was so key to this season. He was that guy. He was the guy that when the play action started to work, that he was going to burn the defense, and that's where you're going to see a lot of these big home runs. But I also believe that that's exactly why Brad Holmes brought Gibbs in. And they wanted somebody else with speed and the ability to catch in the absence of J-Mo. He's not going to be a J-Mo per se, but he will be able to have big play potential being a pass catcher out of the backfield. So, I'm not saying that the Lions won't have big plays or big play potential, or they lack the ability to be splashy, because they had plenty of big plays last season. Goff finished, I think, third or fourth in the majority of categories for completed 20, 30, and 40-yard passes. So they had plenty of opportunity, and they were very successful. But of course, you do want to be able to score at will, but this offense really predicated itself on striking when the opportunity presents itself and taking what the defense was giving away. And I believe that Ben Johnson is going to have a lot of fun, with this group and with the newly acquired guys from this draft, and really be able to put it to work. All right, so here we go. Back to Myers Farm question. How do the Lions handle Kelsey? And there was a quick answer. Hatter's House said put Tracy Walker on him. He did well in 2019. I don't remember the 2019 game. I definitely don't remember Tracy Walker versus Kelsey in 2019. But here's what I will say. This is my off-the-cuff take on how you handle Kelsey, I guess. So the Lions have developed a new defensive scheme this season, which is gap and a half assignment. And what that essentially does is it allows you to bring that extra man up in the box that doesn't really need to have an assignment. From a basic understanding, now your defensive front is responsible for the entire line, or almost the entire line, which frees up the linebackers. So now the linebackers don't have to worry about a gap, right? You'll have somebody free that will always be able to stick to a Travis Kelsey. But the benefit of this is now adding players like Brian Branch and CJ Gardner-Johnson, who are very versatile in that they're able to come up in the box, play in the safety zone, play in the slot. You could now pair or shadow a linebacker that is going to be sticky to Kelsey and shadow that individual with an extra safety or an extra, nickel back in the game. I feel that's how they're going to do it. They're able to run more cover 3 now with the added talent in the defensive back room. I just don't think that they're going to need to bring that extra man up in the box per se to fill a gap now. I think that they're going to be able to have somebody trailing and be more free to, pick up the loose man. That's how I expect it to get done. And I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens next week. I'm hoping that Kelsey doesn't have a good game and he's, non-existent. I really hope Chris Jones doesn't sign any sort of a deal by Monday. And he's out. He's done. So that would be a huge benefit to this Lions offense. So I hope I answered your question. Let me know how you feel about my answer. Do you think that that's going to work? How do you see this new defensive scheme aligning with, some of the bigger talents that we're going to go up against this season? So we'll move on to the third question that came in this week. Another great question. And please send us your questions. info@rockedonpodcastnetwork.com. You can always send us questions there. You can also send us your questions, as a direct message through our social medias. And of course, you can come onto the show. If you want to come onto the show, feel free. So third question is, how good will this running game be? And what happens to the offense if the running game gets off to a slow start? Well, it's a good question. We certainly don't think that this offense is going to have a tough time getting going. They didn't all last season. Excuse me 1 second. Really struggling. Past couple weeks have been tough. Thyroid's been out now for a couple of months, but got these waves and throat gets really tired. So I just, it's weird. So anyway, to answer this question, I really don't feel like they're going to have an issue with a hot start as long as they can stay healthy. Looks like we just got another question that came in. Tim said, I believe the Lions have the parts to have a top 5 defense. Man, that would be huge, wouldn't it? Going from 32 to 5. Top 10 for me was a stretch. Andy's a big believer in the Lions defense being a top 10. I was more along the lines of a top 15. And then about a week ago, after seeing the depth and the way they performed in the last preseason game, they just might have it. But we'll see. They've got some really tough competition on this schedule. It's going to be a long season, I think, to be honest with you. In a good way, though. I just think none of these games are going to be easy, which makes for good football. It makes for watching football even that much more fun. But I think it's going to leave us on the edge of our seat every single game. All right, so going back to this third question here. We certainly didn't see a lot in the preseason that would help us to believe the running game is going to be good. I mean, matter of fact, we didn't see anything from the starters. So right now it's a huge mystery, other than what we've seen at training camp, what I've seen at training camp. I watched a lot of the offense. I didn't have an easy time, being able to see the defense during my visits to training camp. But I'm hopeful. I mean, the offensive line, as long as they pick up where they left off, and now bringing back the likes of Itai, backing that, position up with Glasgow, a healthy Ragnow, a healthy Decker, a healthy Penei Sewell. As long as these guys can stay healthy, I'm very hopeful, that the running game just blisters the defense early and becomes a big problem. There's not much of a size difference between Jamal Williams and Montgomery. And that's good because I didn't want the Lions to not have a powerhouse, style of running game, or a power running game and go pure speed. And I still think that the Lions are missing that big powerhouse bruising, running back that can still, work 3 downs. They've got Montgomery tied up for a while, but that doesn't mean that they won't make moves or bring guys in or find somebody in next year's draft. We'll have to see how, this season goes and, see if anything needs to be adjusted or not. But I expect Montgomery to have a good season. he's never played behind a line like this. So for him to be able to do what he did with Chicago, I would expect, 2 times the production behind this 3-1-3 offensive line. So, in the event that the offense, does become one-dimensional and the running game is not working as well as we expected, or if they lose someone early to injury, I don't think the Lions will have any problems moving the ball. You got to remember they still have 5 or potentially 6 dynamic wide receivers. I think all those wide receivers are going to have good seasons. Some are just going to have more stats than others, but I think they're all going to be utilized. Goff loves to spread the ball around, and I really don't think that you'll see anything different this season. I think that these wide receivers, the running backs, the tight ends, they're all going to get their fair share. And that's what I loved about last season. There was one game, I don't remember which one it was, but Goff hit like 11 guys with a pass in one game. I didn't even know they had 11 guys suited up to catch a ball. So that to me tells me that I don't think the Lions are going to have a problem moving the ball, even if they do go one-dimensional for a game. They're just going to have to run more wide sets, more sets with 3 tight ends or 2 tight ends. And they'll get it moving, but the addition of Sam Laporta, I think, is the very important distinction that needs to be made here, especially to the run game and keeping the defense honest by having a dynamic playmaker that's also, a tight end who really is a pass catcher, just a big-bodied pass catcher that has decent speed. The defense has to stay honest. They can't, just not account for Sam Laporta or he's going to hurt him. So I do feel the Lions, they're not done adding playmakers here. They shown that, right after the initial 53-man came out. They went out and grabbed a couple of players that were not on this roster all season long so far. But if they can keep Reynolds and Knight around, I think they'll be okay. Even as 3rd and 4th options that can step in, I think they'll do fine. I don't see Kabinda being able to help the offense much if he was the only option we had at running back. So I do feel like the Lions need to find a bigger 3-down, running back that can suit this offense in different schemes. Another question comes in here, another comment. Myers Farm. My concern with the defense is the amount of man-on-man they'll play. Guys up front have to be consistent for it to work. That's a great observation. The Lions love to play man. And even now with the style of defense that they're going to be running, it's going to rely on that man defense to be successful. But Cam Sutton is as sticky as they come. CJ Gardner-Johnson is as sticky as they come. Brian Branch might be the stickiest of every single defensive back on this team. I'm not necessarily worried about the man-to-man as I am what I've seen, out of this AG defense last year, which was the bend, don't break, and they constantly broke. I don't want to see that rear its ugly head again. That's what I'm worried about. Hatter's House 710 said, I'm good with our secondary this year. I am too, surprisingly, especially after last season. The first 5-6 games were horrendous. And aside from, the turnovers, the interceptions and that they were able to put together, in bunches, it seemed like, towards the latter half of the season, they still didn't score the greatest. They didn't grade out the greatest. All right. So we've covered, the wide receivers here. As far as the wide receivers, fun fact for you guys, the average height in the NFL for a wide receiver in 2023 is 6'1.5 inches. The Lions are 6'1.5 inches as an average. I found that very funny. the average weight of a wide receiver in the NFL 2023, 199.35 pounds. But I do not have all the weights for the Lions wide receivers to see how they compare. I would say they're probably close. The Lions made a definite improvement there. I feel like this wide receiver core is head and shoulders above what it was last season. I do believe that DJ Chark is going to be sorely missed, even though he didn't have a ton of stats. He was able to produce in other ways, and that's by making the defense honest. And I speak to that often. I'm sure you guys all hear me, speak to this production versus stats, and I mean that. There's a big difference between being a productive player in the NFL and just a stat monger. If you can be a little bit of both, perfect. But somebody that produces, in my opinion, is going to have a much bigger effect on the game than somebody that's just grabbing stats. Because if you're producing, somebody's going to get the stats no matter what. It's when you're not producing that you're not going to be able to get the stats as a team, because the offense is able to just gash you. Like Hatter's house just said, he's worried about scrambling quarterbacks. And I am too. I still feel like that's a major problem. Bryce Young skirted up the middle for 17 yards the other day. And when I saw that, I kind of sat back and I said, you've got to be kidding me. The Lions haven't addressed the biggest glaring issue they had on defense outside of the defensive backs, which was stopping the run from the quarterbacks. I get it, second and third stringers were in there, but every single one of them had their back turned and were running towards the end zone. Back turned to Bryce. You can't turn your back to the quarterback. You just can't. One person has to be facing the quarterback outside of the defensive front line. The front three or the front four. Someone has to be looking. Not necessarily a spy every single play, but somebody has to be looking. Not everybody can have their back turned. All right. So we covered the wide receivers and the running backs, and now I think I want to move in to the tight ends a little bit here. Some interesting information in this tidbit here. Wright had a couple of flashes last season after Hawkinson was traded. And Mitchell was finally, in his first full season, this season. And then the Lions added Sam Laporta in this year's draft. We did have Shane Zielstra on the roster, and unfortunately he suffered a pretty bad injury at the hands of Khalil Dorsey. And I really think that, his production, even though it was largely just touchdowns, I think his production in the running game is going to be missed a little bit. So how do we view the tight end position, and what will the Lions be able to depend on, from this unit in 2023 was the question that came in this week. And what I feel is that this unit is, again, highly underrated and undervalued, just like the wide receivers. I really feel like this tight end group is underrated and undervalued. But I also feel, that this unit is going to be underutilized. And the reason why I say that is last season, Ben Johnson really didn't have a ton of game planning for the tight end group. And he did not mix them in enough, I feel. But we still had a very productive season. It's just that was one element to this offense that I feel was missing. And that can't be this season, in my opinion. I feel like they have to use all options to be successful. We don't know what Sam Laporta is yet. And if Camp tells us anything at all, then he's going to be the next best tight end in this league. But until we find out and until we see, what he's able to do on the field against a real defense in a real game, excuse me, my observations, really came from camp. And I think one of the most notable things that happened last season with this group is that when we traded Hawkinson, that room didn't really skip a beat. And if anything, they got better from a production standpoint. The Lions recorded 12 touchdowns by the tight ends in 2022. Only 3 of them came from Hawkinson. So what does that tell you? We had 9 touchdowns after he left, right? This was a franchise record. Well, they didn't set that record the years prior when Hawkinson was the go-to target. They did it after he left. But they also did it on very limited amount of play calling or targets to the tight end group, which I found very off, like very weird to me. That it's not like they were chucking the ball, to the tight ends a majority of the time to be able to pull this off. They really didn't. But as you could guess, they were second in the league with tight ends to, you guessed it, Kansas City. So a little factoid there for you. So Brock Wright had 4 touchdowns, Shane Zielstra had 4, and James Mitchell had 1. And if you remember, James Mitchell really didn't come on until, latter half of the season when he was starting to get a little bit more playing time, after rehabbing from, I believe he had an ACL coming out of college too. And so after he was done rehabbing, he finally got a little bit of play, but he was very limited. Like I said earlier, I think the absence of Zielstra is going to be more of an impact than I think most people really want to consider. He was a really reliable blocker and somebody that was always in the right spot. He was very reliable in running his routes and performing within his assignment. And I feel like that's going to be missed this season. And hopefully Wright and Laporta will be able to pick up, the duties that Zielstra's left on the table, if you will. So this unit only put up 40 receptions the entire season, 40 receptions on 12 touchdowns. Brock Wright led the group with 216 yards on 18 receptions. I mean, that's just pitiful. When you look at the league average or, even the average of the rookies that usually come in, they usually do better than that. Ben Johnson's offense just really didn't utilize this position to its fullest potential. Hence the reason why I feel that Hawkinson was traded is, why are you going to pay this guy $65 million? What did he get the other day? 68? I thought that he was going to get $15 million a year, and he got just a little bit north of that. And I put that in an article too, and we traded Hawkinson, that he was going to command 15 a year. And I just didn't feel that the Lions were going to go out and pay that kind of money. You might as well put that money on the back of your quarterback. You can get a tight end every 3 years out of the draft that's going to be just as serviceable as any other tight end in the league, minus your top performers. But when you look around the league, you don't have 32 Kelseys, right? You just don't. You might have 2 or 3 guys in this league that play at an elite level as a tight end. And what that tells me is you don't take a tight end in the first round, number one. Number two, it's not a position that you want to sink a lot of resources in. And when you look at what the Lions were able to put up last season with a collective group of nobodies after Hawkinson left, I think it proves it. I think it proves the point that the tight end position is a worthwhile position. Yes, it's a position that is needed, but it's not a position that you should sink a ton of money in and a ton of resources or a ton of draft capital in. There's bigger and better, positions on this football team that would need more attention, in my opinion, than the tight end position ever would. Another key fact to these tight ends, Jared Goff had his highest passer rating per group was tight ends. His passer rating of 141 when targeting Brock Wright tells me that, one, they had great chemistry, two, that Wright was where he was supposed to be, and very reliable. So if you can get that kind of production, and again, keyword production, out of a tight end that's basically a nobody, releasing and trading Hawkinson was the smartest move Brad Holmes made. because now you have a rookie that's making minimal money. He's probably not even making $15 million his entire contract. I can't remember what his contract is. So smart move, very, very smart move. Brad, shows up and performs a masterclass every single draft and every offseason. He's done it for 3 off seasons in a row. But if the run game, in my opinion, is working and this play action does get rolling, that's where these tight ends can benefit greatly. And I feel Laporta will have the largest impact in that department. And that's after we establish the run game and get the play action opened up. That's where I feel Laporta is going to be a big-time threat for the opposing defenses. At the end of the day, if Laporta can step in and at least put up, my goal for him is 400 yards on 40 receptions with a combined 5 TDs, either, a reception TD or running something, off the edge, out of the backfield. We might see it. We might not. That's my goal for Laporta. 400 yards, 40 receptions, 5 combined TDs. I feel that would be a solid performance for him in this offense. And unless Johnson really decides to or is forced to use him, or that position more frequently, I think that this unit will finish probably somewhere towards the middle of the pack this season. All right, we got any more questions out there? What's everybody's thoughts on Sam Laporta? Do you feel like Sam Laporta is going to shock the world? Do you feel like he's going to finish somewhere in the middle for all tight ends? Do you think he'll be the number 1 rookie tight end selected out of this draft? What's your overall thoughts for Sam Laporta in his 2023 season? We'd love to know in the comments. Feel free to send us, any questions anytime. As you can see, we like to get to a few questions at the beginning of every show now. And hopefully you guys are liking the style of the show. We're trying to tone it in a little bit and get to some more useful and beneficial information, as well as having just a good off-the-cuff style of conversation. So the next group I want to get to is the Lions offensive line. I don't really think I need to say much about the offensive line. I mean, I think we really know their identity and who they are. But a question did come in during the week about the offensive line. So to recap, when we look at the roster, your starting wide receivers, or at least the 5 wide receivers that the Lions kept: Marvin Jones, Amon-Ra, Jamison Williams, who's on a suspended reserve list, Antoine Green, Khalif Raymond, and Josh Reynolds. Those will be our top wide receivers to start the season. I still believe the Lions are thin there. I would have kept the 7th. We may see them, get a little active here over the next week. And then the next group that we covered, the tight ends, your starting or initial 53-man roster for the tight ends is Brock Wright, Mitchell, and Sam Laporta. Obviously, Sam Laporta and Brock Wright are going to be your starters, and Mitchell is your second or third tier. So moving on next to the offensive line. Again, this group, this unit, is paramount to this season's success. And without the offensive line, this team does nothing. And we've seen that. When we have our 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th options in there as backups, they struggle. And we've seen it during the preseason. We've seen it with Matt Nelson time and time again. We've seen it with all the backups that they just released. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a shakeup on this offensive line, and I'll explain why here in just a second. So this offensive line finished 5th as a unit last season. Where do you feel like this group is going to finish this season? 1, if everybody stays healthy, and 2, if they don't stay healthy. First, we're going to get to a comment here by Myers Farm. I haven't seen camp footage, so going with Holmes and Campbell's seemingly very high opinion of him. And I believe you're speaking to Sam Laporta there. Yeah, they're very high on Sam Laporta. And I think that the key there is he didn't play much in the preseason, so they really wanted to reserve him for the season. They didn't want to take any chances with their playmakers, which, I mean, I get it. I still would have loved to have seen him out there, and I think the main reason is these coaches, they're not going to show you a darn thing this early in the season. They don't want any tape on these guys, especially heading into the Kansas City game. When you think about it, either the Chiefs played possum and they put a bunch of tape out there this preseason that is completely useless, and it probably is, or they put some tape out there that the Lions are going to be able to utilize, to be able to scheme something up in this first game, which is, I mean, let's not blush about it or anything, but this game is going to be incredible. I'm not a professional athlete, but even being a professional athlete, I can only imagine you're walking into the Super Bowl champion's house. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. There's going to be fireworks everywhere. There's going to be a lot of red and white and yellow worn in that game and are in those stands. And this is the opening week to the NFL. I feel like there's gonna be some nerves there, and I don't want those nerves to turn into a 14-0 deficit to start the first quarter. So that's the only reason why I wanted to see this team get a little bit more preseason action was, get some sort of a rhythm established. But they did have some joint practices too, but nothing is, like a game. So, all right, so back to the offensive line. The Detroit Lions offensive line is expected to be one of the best in football again this season. And the Lions offensive line, is their highest rated group, if you will, for the second year in a row. So out of all positional groups on this team, the offensive line is the highest rated. And as the questions were stated, the group finished fifth last season and is expected to be just as good or better this season. So the question was, the offensive line finished as a top 5 unit last season. Where do you think this group finishes this season, and what are your biggest worries? So they finished fifth last season. I still think they're going to be a top 5. The Lions offensive line has good depth with players like Glasgow. Sorsdal needs a lot of time still. But who else do we have? Who else is on, this offensive line that you really trust? Because I don't trust any of them, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, let me just peek at this. They only kept 8, and that's what really shocked me. Outside of Taylor Decker, Jonah Jackson, Frank Ragnow, Halapouliuti Vaitai, Penei Sewell, and Graham Glasgow, and there's your top 6 guys. You got Matt Nelson, Awol Sika, Sorsdal, Max Percher, and Connor Galvin. I mean, who do you trust to back up your top 6 guys? And the reason why I feel like that's a giant concern, I'll get to here in just a second. But, the offensive line coach, Hank Fraley, he's one of the best in the business. There's no reason not to trust this guy and to trust, what he's bringing to Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes about what they need. I feel like, they went deep on the defensive line with 12. They kept 8 on the offensive line. I feel like they could have went 10-10 here. Or maybe found somebody, on the waiver wire. Looks like we've got another statement in here by Myers Farm. Let me read it. No O-line can get through the season without an injury here or there. Very true. The backups better be able to improve while playing alongside the starters. Yeah, they have to, and they have to in a hurry. We've seen it. When the subs were in last season, we struggled, to move the ball. And Goff was under attack or under pressure at times when we had backups in there. And that can't happen. We cannot have a sieve up the middle of the offensive line get to Goff and, take Goff out for the season. That's my biggest concern, is losing the quarterback. They'll find ways to move the ball. They'll find ways to score. But you have to keep Goff upright. And that's my biggest concern. The Lions' offensive line never ranked outside the top 10 last season in 2022, which is a huge accomplishment. Even with the amount of subs that they had in at times and the different, but he got line situations, or they had a lot of different line sets, if you will. With the mix and match between the backups and the starting rotations. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. They had a lot of different starting rotations, and for them not to finish, outside of the top 10, that's still a damn good, offensive line. But it's the keys, throughout the game that. If Goff is under pressure and he's taking too much pressure and he's taking too many sacks and he doesn't have enough time to get the ball off, well, you're not going to be able to score points. And we saw that in the Dallas game, and we saw that in the Patriots game. And that can't happen again. So, with all the different substitutions that the Lions had to deal with last season, this season the Lions' offensive line should be even better with the return of Vaitai from injury, but that is also one of the team's weaknesses. Vaitai missed all of 2022 with a back injury. My back and neck is fused, or both fused. I know how it goes every single day. Every single day is different. I could only imagine being a professional athlete with that kind of weight that you're carrying around and all the intense workouts that you're doing. It doesn't take much to re-injure a back. So if he goes down, his career is over. He almost didn't even suit up this year. He was questioning whether he wanted to play football anymore. And what got him up out of bed was he wanted to go play with his brothers. That was one of his quotes. So, then I look at Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell. We don't really have any solid backups behind either of them. Matter of fact, we don't even have a right tackle. I mean, yeah, you could say Glasgow could do it, but we really don't have a right tackle to back up Penei Sewell. And as durable as they are, they only allowed 2 or 4 sacks respectively throughout all of last season, which is damn good. My main issue is this, though. The Lions, like I said earlier, they only kept 8 on the roster for the offensive line. And they have no right tackle to back up Sewell. Nelson is a liability. Vaitai is a huge injury risk. Ragnow has a toe injury that is inoperable. And if he injures that foot again, he too may be done because there's no way to fix his foot. So he's playing on borrowed time. He's playing on one defensive lineman to come and stomp on his foot. And it could be done. So that's my biggest concern. It's depth. It's quality of depth. And that the lack of backups on this roster, it scares the bejesus out of me. I don't understand it. I really don't. So in my opinion, my humble opinion, I feel like the Lions should be out there targeting a $10 million a year guy. Somebody that has experience, but, they're not asking for 15 or 18 million. Somebody that can fill in for a couple of seasons and hold down. I mean, Glasgow's only signed for a year, right? So you really need somebody that can step in and play center that can also slide over to guard. That takes care of the 2 biggest liabilities on this offensive line. And that's if Ragnow goes down, Glasgow can slide in at center. But if Vaitai goes down, you don't have anybody to slide in behind him that's worth a damn, in my opinion. So if I were Brad Holmes, I would be out trying to find another offensive lineman that can step in right now. So I think that's it for the offensive line. The last guy, the last position I'll cover here on the offense is Jared Goff. In the quarterbacks. As you guys are all well aware, the Lions only kept 2 quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater, Jared Goff. Hendon Hooker is placed on the NFI list, and the Lions did say that they will be taking Hendon Hooker off of the NFI list and activating him at least one point throughout the season so they don't, intentionally, unintentionally squeeze an extra year out of his contract. They didn't want to do that to the guy. So that's who we're stuck with. They also they re-signed somebody else. I just can't believe he's on the practice squad again. And I'll get to that in a second too. Blau. I mean, my goodness. Can they really not find kickers and quarterbacks? Oh. All right. So Jared Goff, man, will he be another top 5 quarterback this season? What do you guys think? You really think that he's going to bust it out again? Yeah, 15 is way too much. Hatter's house. It's way too much unless you're a starter. That's why I was thinking somebody that, is looking for 10, not 15, not 18. The Lions have the money right now to be able to do pretty much anything that they want. And I feel like they're going to be stingy with it, and they're going to either hold it until the trade deadline when, people are ready to jump ship and the Lions are still in contention for the first time in a long time. And I think that's where the Lions are going to make a jump. I really do. I really think they're going to pull in a couple of pieces to make the push through the end of the season, which hopefully will end up, deep in the playoffs. But be that as it may, I don't want to see them get bootstrapped and have to go out and overpay for a lineman either, because they didn't do it early in the season, after cuts. So first response, the question was, is Goff going to be a top 5 again in 2023? And Hatter's House says, if the run game is as consistent, I would agree. I would 100% agree. So Goff had the 6th most passing yards in the NFL last season. If you can't tell, I'm really struggling with my throat tonight. So Goff had the 6th most passing yards in the NFL last season with 4,438 yards, which included 5 300-yard games. He underwhelmed, though, with 29 TDs. But there's a reason why, and it goes right back to what Hatter's House just said. The run game. Jamal Williams put 17 TDs on the ground. That undoubtedly is going to pull away from your quarterback's ability to throw touchdowns when you're that efficient at scoring TDs on the ground. So an underwhelming 29 TDs, it's just a statement. I don't think that, if Goff would have thrown for 35 TDs, great. He would have been in, the zone of Burrow or Holmes. Burrow or Allen. But he didn't need to. They averaged about 26 points a game throughout the season, and the running game was on fire. And I think that, what Goff did last season was nothing short of spectacular. When I compared last season to his Super Bowl season, they're an almost mirrored image. And I was shocked at just how identical those seasons were. So when you get a second, look up Jared Goff's the 2019 season, the Super Bowl run season with the Rams, and compare it side by side with 2022. And I think you'll be shocked too that, in my opinion, Jared Goff was playing at an elite Super Bowl type level. And we're just one win away from getting into the dance, and who knows what would have happened then. I really think they would have made a good run. So here's a fun little stat for you. Goff has 8 home games. Is it 8 home games? 6 home games in the Dome, right? At least. And 7 of his last 8 games are in a comfy, air-conditioned dome. So when you look at this season and you look at where Goff plays his best football, he plays his best football indoors in a dome. And he's going to have about 13 or 14 games this season indoors in a dome. So I think that Goff is definitely going to finish in the top 5 again this season. I think that it's going to be a unique culmination of all different aspects of the offense working together. It's going to be the tight ends. It's going to be the wide receivers. It's going to be multiple running backs. I don't think anyone's going to have like this incredible amount of stats individually. I think the stats are going to be fairly spread out. But I think Goff is going to put up another year of at least 4,000 passing yards and probably 30 TDs. The biggest goal I have for Goff is I don't want to see him go over 10 interceptions. So if he can throw 30 for 10, I'd be elated. I think that'll get the job done. And that's just regular season. He's going to have to throw more in the postseason too. So I want to take a look down at the practice squad and go through a couple of the rules here. In case you guys didn't know, teams can carry up to 6 practice squad spots on players with unlimited experience in the NFL. And the remaining spots are filled with players having less than 2 accrued seasons. There's a lot of weird rules in the NFL. Teams can also protect up to 4 players each week that other teams cannot sign away into their active roster. The 12 players who are not protected will be eligible to sign with another team's active roster during the week and have to be on the active roster for at least 3 weeks to avoid penalty. So rules also allow teams to promote 2 players from the practice squad per week without the need to create an additional roster spot, essentially creating a temporary 55-man roster. Those players are eligible to play in that week's game, and they revert back to the practice squad at the end of the week without having to pass through any type of waivers. My only question with this is, how does that new quarterback rule affect this? Does this mean now you can have a temporary 56-man roster because you can carry a third quarterback on the roster for the game that can also dress for the game that won't count against the game roster? So I'm wondering if that's affected by that or not. I just had a comment come in by Myers Farm. I feel that he, and he means Goff, can play low mistake ball and just use what Holmes put around him. He will improve from last year. I can get on board with that. I think what the biggest key that you stated is mistake-free football. He's got to protect the ball, and he did a really good job at that last season. One of the best in the league at it. If you just give Goff, up to 3 seconds a time, because I think the average pass in the NFL is about 2.4 seconds. So if you at least give the guy 2.3 seconds, he's going to be just fine. He just needs to stay upright. He needs to have a clean jersey at the end of the game. Doesn't mean he's not going to get hit. Doesn't mean he's not going to get sacked. Doesn't mean he won't have some rough games. But if you keep Goff upright for the majority of the season, there's no telling how successful this season's going to be. All right, so let's take a little deeper look here at the initial practice squad and the signings that happened over the last week. So on August 30th, the Lions signed wide receiver Doris Fountain, defensive lineman Quinton Bohanna, quarterback David Blau. Yeah, I can't believe he's back on the roster, man. We know that Blau is not any sort of an answer to anything. I don't get why they would bring Blau back to this team. I didn't pay close enough attention to see what happened to Martinez. I don't know if he was signed away by somebody else, but they must have really disliked Martinez to let him get away. They also signed guard Michael Neese and defensive end Raymond Johnson to the practice squad. And then a bit of shocking news, out of the Jets camp was when they waived Zonovan Knight, and they didn't even try to, auction the guy off for at least a 7th-round pick. Knight signed with the Jets as an undrafted rookie, and after Breece Hall suffered an ACL injury, Knight got his shot, and he produced 300 yards on 85 carries, 1 touchdown. He had 13 catches for 100 yards. But in his first 3 games in the NFL, he had 230 rushing yards and 10 catches. That really caught the eye of the league and Aaron Glenn. And Aaron had this to say about Knight ahead of the Jets Week 15 matchup, which leads me to believe that Bam Knight is going to be someone we want to stick around. AG said that he's a good player, good runner. The thing is, I've been told by other coaches around this league that's played against that team that he's a really tough runner. So we understand exactly who he is. Kind of a vanilla statement, but tough is what we like, right? So it'll be interesting to see how long he lasts on the practice squad, or if the Lions, will move him to the active roster or use protection like we just, spoke about in the beginning of the practice squad segment here to keep him around. But in what was, a little bit of head scratching, or a little bit of a head scratcher, if you will, was when the initial 53-man roster came out and the Lions only had 2 running backs on it. That kind of blew my mind. Fullback Jason Kabinda. You had Montgomery and Gibbs. That's it. So it made more sense that, the following day when the news broke about, Reynolds coming back as to why that went down the way that it went down. And in case you didn't know, the Lions wanted to put Okora on injured reserve, but they didn't want him, out for the entire season. So in order to make that all work, he had to make the initial 53-man roster, and then he could be placed on IR. But if they placed him on IR prior to cuts or prior to 4 p.m. on August 30th, the day after cuts, he'd have to sit the entire season. So they created a temporary roster spot for Okora, avoiding the risk of losing, him on waivers. And the Lions cut Reynolds, knowing that he was a veteran who is not subject to waivers. So they didn't have the risk of losing Reynolds at all unless someone wanted to sign him. And they didn't have any dead money, obviously, for Reynolds. So it just made a good move even better. But then on August 30th at 4 p.m., the Lions re-signed Reynolds, and laterally they placed defensive end Julian Okora on injured reserve, which I believe only he has to sit out for 4 weeks. That's it. So big difference between, injured reserve of the past and what it is now. Lastly here, take a look at some of these guys on the practice squad. On August 29th, the Lions signed wide receiver Maurice Alexander. Alexander spent his time on Detroit's practice squad last season before getting a call up to the 53-man roster late in the year. He has real value as a punt returner. He averages about 23.5 yards per return this preseason, including a 95-yard touchdown. Man, I was so excited for that guy. And, seeing what he was able to do and what he was able to produce in that game. He's had a tough road, and that game, I'm sure, made it all that much more better for him to realize and to know internally that he's got it. He has the ability. So great job by Alexander. And I'm glad the Lions, stuck with him. I was kind of on the hater train for Alexander for a minute there, but I'm glad he's stuck around for now. Next, offensive guard Keoti Awosika. He gives the Lions some more experience and depth on the practice squad, along with interior of the offensive line. He played in 10 games last season. And I say that loosely, that he's bringing experience and depth, because Awosika is definitely a liability if he has to get in the game. So I'm not too keen on that signing. Again, that's where I'd rather see the Lions go out and find somebody that can play, even if they've got to pay him a decent amount of money. Another head scratcher. The Lions re-signed, I think, for the 4th or 5th time now. That's a joke. Michael Badgley. Badgley was waived before camp, but rejoins the team on the practice squad after going 24 for 28 and kicking field goals for the Lions last year. He was perfect 33 for 33 on extra points. So that gives them some insurance, I guess, but not past the 48-yard line. Neither one of our kickers are going to hit a field goal past the 48-yard line, I feel. So one of my favorite signings to the practice squad is this next guy, wide receiver Dylan Drummond. He was a tryout player, turned into an excellent football player this offseason, in training camp, in preseason, and joint practices. The guy is he's almost there, and he showed what he can do in these preseason games, and I'm glad that he's sticking around. Phenomenal route runner, catches the ball out front, great speed. He puts his body out there. He'll sacrifice his body to make the catch. So it's good that the Lions are going to continue to develop him, and we'll see what he can do, hopefully in the near future. Lions also signed tackle Connor Galvin, who was with the Lions most of the offseason in camp, but the undrafted free agent out of Baylor had a solid training camp and was Detroit's highest graded offensive lineman in the preseason per PFF. So he was a Big 12 offensive lineman of the year. He provides the Lions some young depth on the practice squad after the team only kept 8 offensive linemen, which still makes no sense to me, but it is what it is. Another guy that actually played well in the preseason was safety Brandon Joseph. He was also signed to the practice squad. The rookie came out of Notre Dame. He was just caught up in this numbers game. The Lions brought in a lot of talent, a lot of ballers, a lot of playmakers this last offseason. So he had 11 tackles and an interception in the preseason. So he's definitely shown that he can hawk the ball, and he's going to add some depth and to the safety position while he's on the practice squad. Cornerback Chase Lucas is back with the Lions. The second-year cornerback had a very strong camp. He had a very strong ending to the preseason in the third game against the Panthers. But again, lost out on the numbers. I really thought that the Lions were going to keep an extra cornerback, but they didn't for whatever reason. And it didn't make much sense to me that they were going to activate Mosley off of PUP when he may not be ready to play until at least week 2 or 3. What's an extra week? And without getting into the numbers game on how many people, how many players can be on IR and NFI and reserve versus, all the other designations that exist here, I just didn't understand why they would activate him when we had plenty of depth. We didn't need him to be a starter or even a rotational player right now. There was at least 7 guys that we could trust between the safeties, DBs, and cornerbacks that could step on this field right now. And he didn't need to come back right now. So a bit of a head scratcher for me too, why they would, allow somebody like Starling Thomas to get plucked. I don't get it. One of the, so you got 3 more guys here. So linebacker Trevor Nowaski, which on one of our shows, we had some people in that were rooting for Trevor. And, I really wasn't real high on this guy. He's a hometown guy, played in, Saginaw Valley State Division II. And, he has good movement, but I just didn't see him really make a lot of plays that made me have any confidence in his ability. He's got great size and athleticism. He did break up one pass there in the last game, but he never turned his head around either. And I feel like the pass was going out of bounds either way. So I just didn't see much out of them. Obviously, the Lions have seen a lot more. They're there working with him every single day to keep him around and see if they can develop him. But the Lions also kept an extra linebacker. So keeping 6 linebackers, which I predicted in my 53-man roster that I put out on Rockdown Podcast Network .com is where you can find mine. I put it out at about 2:30 in the morning, I believe, after the last game. And I expected the Lions to keep 6 in the linebackers because there's just too much talent there. And, I didn't see anybody else that would really need to stay on this team outside of Mabin, who plays excellent special teams. So Lions also signed defensive lineman Chris Smith. He was another undrafted rookie out of Notre Dame. He recorded a sack in the preseason, also showed off enough versatility for the Lions, to want to continue to develop his game too. If you notice the trend here, Chris Smith, undrafted rookie. Trevor Nowaski, undrafted rookie. Chase Lucas, second-year drafted rookie. Safety Brandon Joseph, rookie out of Notre Dame. I'm pretty positive he was undrafted, obviously. Tackle Connor Galvin, undrafted, free agent out of Baylor. Dylan Drummond, tryout player, obviously undrafted. Maurice Alexander, I don't think he was drafted, but I don't remember at this point. He's been around for a couple seasons. So lastly is our international player who doesn't count towards the roster at all in any way, shape, or form, is tackle Max Percher. So he joined the Lions as the NFL's International Player Pathway Program for the 2023 season. He spent the last 2 seasons with the Rams after being allocated to Los Angeles via the program in 2021. So that's all we had on practice squad, initial 53-man roster on the offensive side of the ball. So here's my predictions on the schedule. First, let me see if you guys have any more comments or questions. All right. So next week, September 7th, the Lions get off in a big way to start the season. Kansas City Chiefs. Now, we're going to be doing another show Sunday. Maybe. We're going to be doing our pregame show to the Kansas City Chiefs either Wednesday night, probably around 8:30 p.m., 9 o'clock, somewhere in that range on the later side. And we might even do one live just before the game on Thursday. It might be in KC. So if I'm in KC, I might do some live stuff and go talk to some Lions fans while I'm out there. So I guess the show for this Sunday is tentative. Obviously, we'll put the information out there and let everybody know. But our bigger game, bigger pregame warm-up, if you will, is either going to be Sunday night or Wednesday night. And that's where I'm going to have more information on the game itself. We talk more about both sides of the ball, both programs. But I've got the Lions winning this game. I know that I made a prediction when the schedule came out. I think we were live when the schedule came out. And I put a prediction out there. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it. I think I said 27-21. The Lions would beat Kansas City. And I think I'm going to stick with that. I think I'm going to stick with the Lions beating the Chiefs 27-21. I think the Lions are going to get off in a big way. I feel like their defense is going to have to step up and keep these Kansas City Chiefs under 21 points. They're going to lose this game. So Lions win, Kansas City 27-21. Home game against Seattle the following week on September 17th. The Lions are not going to lose their home opener twice. Last year was to the Eagles. They're not going to lose it this year. So they're going to beat the Seattle Seahawks. They're not going to have as great of a season as what they had last season. I think that Geno Smith is going to take a step back. I think he had with what I call beginner's luck, even though he's not a beginner anymore. Last season, he struck fire and he had a hell of a season, but I just don't see him being able to continue it this season. Seahawks did get better all the way around the ball, though, especially the defensive side of the ball. So this isn't going to be an easy game, but I have the Lions winning this game 31-28. Falcons and Lions. I do not have a score for this game. But I do believe that the Lions are going to win this game too. It's back-to-back home games. They're going to go on a 3-0 run. Lions beat the Falcons. Lions are going on a 4-0 run when they visit the Packers in Lambeau. The Lions are going to continue that run when they visit the Panthers, or when the Panthers visit the Lions. 5-0 at week 5. I don't see the Lions losing a game until the trap game, which is going to be Tampa Bay. I don't know why. It's a trap game to me. It's a game they should win. So I have the Lions taking a dive versus the Buccaneers, ending their winning skid of 5 in a row. Lions are 5-1 when they leave Tampa Bay. And I think they even skid one more time and they lose to the Ravens, dropping the Lions to 5-2 before their Monday night home game against the Raiders, where they pick up their win streak again. The Lions are 6-2 after the Raiders go home. The next week, the Lions visit the Chargers. This is a tough game. It's a tough game, and it is so tough. I feel like the Lions. I feel like the Lions are probably going to lose this game. So, Lions are 6-3 after they leave LA. And then they're going to be 8-3 by the time the Packers go home. So they're going to win against the Bears. They're going to win against the Packers. They're going to beat the Saints. They're going to beat the Bears again. They're definitely going to beat the Broncos. They're going to lose the first game to the Vikings. They're going to beat the Cowboys. And they're going to win against the Vikings. So what is that, 4 losses? 13-4? I mean, that's my initial thought on this schedule. I've had them anywhere between 12-5 to 13-4. Andy said 14-3. But I think 13-4, any way you slice it, is possible. I really think it's possible for the Detroit Lions to pull that off this season. The only wavering part of my predictions here that I had the Lions sweeping the entire division. Yeah, at the NFC North. Sorry. I had them sweeping the NFC North, and now I have them losing one game. I feel like, they have a lot of their divisional rival, games are back to back to back. It seems like, the last 8 games of the season, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 5 NFC North games, NFC North rival games. I feel like with all the travel and everything that they're going to have to do this season, which they've lucked out on, they're going to end up losing one of those games. But, of course, that prediction only remains if the Lions stay healthy. So that's all I had for you guys tonight. Again, another solo mission. It's a little bit easier when we have the other half in here able to bounce questions back and forth. And hopefully we'll see him back here soon. But until we do, I hope you guys enjoyed this little show tonight on what we kind of got going on with the offensive side of the roster. We'll get into the defensive side of the roster in our next show. But until next time, I hope you all enjoyed Off the Cuff. Good night.
So, we look like we're ready. But this is day one. It's about the work. And I've said that from day one. It'll always be the same message. It's about work. You got to go earn your right every year. It doesn't matter what the players are, the coaches, expectations, where you were, where you're going. We got to work, man.
Wants to throw it to Sewell. He caught it. He stole on first down. Oh, the big man dives down to the 31-yard line. Oh, that is beautiful.
Let me tell you something. I love this team now. I got goosebumps, gentlemen. I love this team.
Fields looking pressured, hit from behind, taken down. Aiden Hutchinson got him.
What do you think about the secondary?
Just look at the name, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You drafted Branch.
It started off with that huge hit on Beasley.
McCollum bends out. There's a big hit right away. And boom!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Goff dropped it in the bucket that time.
We're in our window now to win.
Aaron Rodgers exits the NFC North as a loser.